so Host uses AutoHost as a way to screen our guests as well. And we began looking for a solution to take screening guests to the next level. One of the first questions out of most owners, especially first-time short-term rental owners and people who have been doing it for a little bit, is how do you screen the guests? What do you look for? And they're always very excited to share with us how they've been screening their guests for several years. And we just found that maybe relying just on what the guest is saying and relying on the subjective peer review system wasn't quite dialing into screening guests, and then also fraud like we wanted. So would you mind touching on, maybe in a nutshell, guest screening is just risk mitigation like you had mentioned. So how is AutoHost taking guest screening from kind of the subjective, hey, this is what the guest is saying they're doing, these are their 3 or 5 reviews that they have. How is AutoHost taking that a little bit above and beyond?
Right. So there's a few tiers to guest screening. And so I'll say that no matter at what level you're at, going up a level is always great. So if you're not doing anything, then ask some questions, see what the guests are saying, right? And you're right, if you're asking some questions, then move on to the next level and see if you can collect some more information, personal information, security deposits to have the guests be reliable for those things. And that's kind of how AutoHost got started. We actually started not by implementing the actual process, which we do now. We started with just giving suggestions. So we started with saying, hey, given your reservation parameters and given all the risk, we're going to run our magic, run our algorithm, take all the data points into consideration, and basically say, we would spit out a bunch of things that you should do. Like in this case, this seems quite safe. Just make sure to reiterate the basic rules and, that they can be on their way. In this case, we see some red flags. Make sure to collect ID, give them the stricter set of rules, and maybe even arrange an in-person check-in, things like that. So we would start with a list of recommendations. But then what AutoHost does now, so say when we talk about full platform, is that we're the ones that are able to now automate these things for our clients. So when you use AutoHost, beyond asking questions, which is still very important. So right there on AutoHost, you can have things like, what is the purpose of your
Yes.
stay? And do you agree to those rules? And who's coming with you? These are not all techie checks, but they're all very valuable because a legitimate guest that is not up to no good is going to be willing to provide that information. They recognize the responsibility in renting out a property. They have nothing to hide, and therefore your responsibility is just to take that info, store it safely, making sure you're not compromising their personal information, but basically make sure that the entire transaction is not a black box. So things you can do a level above just asking certain questions is really some objective data points include ID verification. So we keep ID on file, but we also actually verify the validity of the ID. We do biometric
Yes.
scans, so people will be taking a selfie, comparing themselves to the ID, because that's also an element where it's very easy when needed to kind of find a loophole in the system, say even with an Airbnb profile, to use an existing profile or pay somebody off for a profile when it comes to, unfortunately, we see some local gang activity that would do
Yep.
that, pay off a teenager or a 19-year-old to open an account. So biometric scans are important. You have things like credit card on file, security deposit. When needed, you can run background checks and credit checks. We do things like scanning the actual IP and system. So under the most bottom kind of core layer of what AutoHost does is also a threat intelligence software. So we also go deeper towards, are they using a burner phone number? Is there any risk? Now we're getting into serious fraud, but is there any risk of false
Yep.
identity? Is the person, and a false identity could be a simple, they made a mess, they got too many bad reviews, so they're opening a new Airbnb profile and trying to pretend to be John Doe. Or it could be more serious fraud that then results in criminal enforcement activity. You're getting into, identity theft and sex trafficking and drug smuggling and weapons and so on. So all of these elements are important to kind of bring into the picture.